Let's go ahead. We're right on time for the agenda to how about our presentations and discussions again, this is our community development work group. So again, we're going to go over some large park development presentations. And I believe Gregory Paley, you are first on the agenda to give a presentation.
Thank you, Marion. I appreciate it. You can call me Greg, by the way. It
Okay.
pops up as Gregory, but I respond to both. That's fine.
All right. Works.
I'm going to have the team at LAI pull up an image here, and I have been working with some of the folks on this call, Gina and Soren and Ray and Morgan, and they're familiar with this project and the status, but I'm welcome the opportunity here to share what we're doing here with the rest of the group. I'm going to give a caveat. Some of this hasn't been approved, and we're still working diligently with city staff to come up with final plans. But let's go up to the top image here, guys. So we're the developers, Oakwood Homes, the master developer of Wander. Wander's 318 acres in the city of Saratoga Springs. It's divided into 3 villages. So each village has a village plan, which amounts to basically a specific zoning for that village. And as part of and currently we're developing in Village 2. So we're about halfway through the project right now, almost halfway through the project. But as we move across Riverside Drive into Village 3, the Jordan River and the park, 30-acre park that we're going to be developing as a part of our village plan, which we have approved here in Village 3, in which we're going to start development in that village in probably about this time next year. So we're currently entitling plats over there. And so the Jordan River, we have about a little over a mile, maybe 1.1, 1.2 miles of riverfront frontage along the Jordan River. So the park itself is going to be kind of a long, narrow park that interfaces with the river the entire way, and will contain the Jordan River Trail from Pioneer Crossing down to Pony Express Drive. We've already completed the Pony Express Parkway. We've already completed the section that goes along Village 1 from Pony Express down off screen here down to 400 South. So we've already completed that portion of the trail. But we're here to talk about the park and our interface with the river. So let's go to the next screen right here. So the way we're oriented on this map, I apologize. North is to the left. And so the northernmost part of our park here starts at Pioneer Crossing. And that's where we're going to start development of the park. We're going to be developing the park as we improve and develop plats that are adjacent to the park. And so, again, these are conceptual. We agreed with the city early on when we first got involved with this project. The park was a big focus, and staff and members of the council were very vocal and specific about things that they would like included in this park to make it a real special amenity, not just for our homeowners here, but for the residents of Saratoga and kind of the greater populace of the Salt Lake Valley. So we intended to do something special. We agreed to do what I believe is kind of over and above the minimums what the city required, but we're glad to do that because we think it's going to be a pretty fantastic park when it starts, when it's completed here. So starting at Pioneer Crossing, we'll come in off Pioneer Crossing. We're going to have the trail itself, Jordan River Trail, will extend down. And kind of the first thing you experience there is, and again, conceptual, but a parking lot right here to allow members of the public to come in, park, potentially, with kayaks, whatnot. And then we have a kayak launch ramp that we anticipate is going to be going right down there in the northern portion of the park. There'll be restrooms, shade structures, benches sprinkled along the length of this trail from north to south. And you see an example of that in blue right there. And then we have kids' playground. Here we have it divided into 2 different age groups for the playground. We're still working out the details. We want to make sure that that parents are able to see, they don't come with just one age group of kids, so that we're looking to make sure that one parent can kind of oversee the whole playground right there, then at the same time keep them from the little ones from wandering off down towards the river, which might not be uh, the best thing in the world, but it does happen, right? My kids would be down there sticking their feet in the mud. I know that. So, um, and then, so one thing I did want to point out here, we are only owning, we don't own all the way to the river here. Some of what you see here is wetlands and state lands. So we're not necessarily, we're not going to be improving down in the wetlands. We're going to leave that in a natural state. And then there'll be some interface with the non-wetland state lands portions. But what you see there in green, in the light green, is what we're going to be improving. And then as you move down to the south, we kind of have a big feature, and it's dictated by the topography, and that's our grand event lawn right there. A little bit to the left there, guys. Yeah, and that's big enough. We don't have it to scale here, but folks can hold soccer practices. I'm sure there'll be people playing t-ball. Big area. Again, that's probably our widest area of the whole park. As we move farther south, we have a river overlook. That's going to be right there. And that's going to be kind of, think of it as like a boardwalk material. Once we get to a certain point and we're not able to really impact the land anymore, it'll raise above, sort of like at Yellowstone or other places where there's sensitive grounds underneath. So that'll be that. And that'll be, folks can go out there, take a peek at the river up close and personal without getting wet. And then moving south, smaller lawns. We have secondary trails that have different types of surfaces than the main concrete trail. So that's, I believe, like a crusher fines type of trail along there. We're still working there. As we move south again, there'll be some, some sort of, what would I call that area there? So the meandering crusher fines trails, and we'll probably have some mounding of the dirt there to give some buried relief, and smaller lawn areas. Again, as we keep moving south, places to rest if you're walking, or get out of the shade, or be able to park your bike for a while, have lunch. And then it's more the same as we move down to the south. And I would just add kind of to keep with the oh, here we go. Yeah, so that area in the lightest of green right there, that is going to be primarily, we have an HOA. We have a amenity center there that's going to be for the benefit of the HOA, but it's not really drawn out because we're still working through the plans. There's going to be an area for parking and additional access for the public as they come through. Again, the public's able to park on the streets. These are public streets. We will be providing off-street parking as well. And if they want to park on the street between the kind of formalized off-street parkings, we have pass-throughs here where they can walk through and get to the park as well. Yeah, shown on the map. And then I think kind of the thing, here we go. Yeah, as we move down to the south, this was something that council was real adamant about, and I think it ends up being a great idea. It's an art space. So in this area right here, we're calling it an art garden, and it's an area for art displays, sculptures, art projects, small art fairs, things like that. And so we're still working through the details of what that's going to look like from a construction standpoint. This is just an illustrative, but Oakwood's going to go ahead and build this, and we're going to seed it with an initial piece of art. What that art piece is going to be. I'm not an artist, so I don't know, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of input as to what that might want to be. If we could just scroll down a touch here. There we go. Yeah, so then when we just pass the art garden right there, we're going to have the trail's going to bifurcate. It's going to go down to the south, and it's going to go down to this cul-de-sac, and then to Pony Express, across from where the current access, where the current trail terminates, to the south Pony Express, and then we're going to have the trail continue on over to where the bridge currently goes across the river at Pony Express, and that's kind of the boundary of our project there, and that'll allow people to go eastward on Pony Express and off to where they want to go if they want to fly their model planes across at the little airport there or continue on to the east. But that's basically our park right there. We think that we're going to start construction either towards the end of 25 or possibly into 26, more likely 25. Again, it's coordinating with the plats we're building up there in the north, and that timeline's still to be determined. But that is our park, 30 acres, and we're real proud of what we've produced so far, and in conjunction with city staff who's been doing a great job. Thank you, Gina. And we're super excited about it. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I'm able to, should there be any.
Thank you, Greg. That's a great overview. And I know I have some questions, but I'm going to turn it over to the committee first. And I can't see, does anybody have any questions? If so, just, raise your hand or just even chime in. Dan Potts, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I didn't hear you say the word nature or fishing or anything like that in all of this plan. Let me just address that quickly. I've fished I've fished this reach on and off all of my life. I'm 70 years old, and so I know it. The neat thing about this reach of the river is that the fish in the Jordan River are not only edible, but they are maybe some of the best tasting fish and healthy fish that I've ever eaten in my entire life. So that's cool, since I'm an avid fisherman. But so having some access to fishing, for instance, on that sharp bend opposite your art facility would be an optimal place for a fishing pier or something like that. So I just throw that out. And then, again, I never heard the word nature or wildlife or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for the input. So we do have that kayak launch up north. So if you're talking about fishing on foot, we don't own the land down adjacent to the river. That's owned by the state. So we're trying to be real sensitive about how we intrude on that. But it's good to know about the fish being edible. I love fishing. So, so I'll definitely be down there with a pole and a reel once this thing gets constructed. But we do have the
but it will all be Greg, it will all be open to angling anyway, right? I mean, they're certainly not going to keep anglers out, right?
Right. This is going to, Oakwood Homes is going to be dedicating this to the city. And so, yeah, these are going to be our public land. So people are able to go from the park down. As far as a trail that leads down to there, as Greg said, it's state land. Something maybe the city would look at further down the road as far as putting some of that in. What they're showing is what was proposed in their community and village plan. And so, with that boundary line, as far as the property line, it does become a little bit restrictive. However, with it being public lands, access is still going to, the trails that are currently there that go down to the river, I don't think are going to be changing.
Right, but the kayak access would require the same kinds of considerations that, let's say, a fishing access would. So, yeah, that's just a
right.
404, yeah, whatever, a permit from the state.
Yeah, flood control. Thank you, Dan. Those are great comments. Heidi Hoven from.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm from National Audubon. This is really, really. What's that?
I didn't hear anybody say anything.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is really exciting to see. Thank you for the presentation. I am sort of following on something that Dan brought up, and I agreed that it would be really neat if anglers had some access, and I love that the kayakers and perhaps canoeists could have their access. But I just want to put in a plug for protections for the wildlife along the riverbank, and just knowing what's happened at Bountiful Pond. If any of you have been up there, it's sort of overrun with tracks, eroded tracks down to the water, and trash, and not to just blame anglers by any means, Dan, but I do know that that can be an issue. And if, is part of this planning, encompassing those kind of guidelines, working with the city or state, or is this more sky level, conceptual view?
I can probably answer that, Greg, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
This is a conceptual plan, and we have sat down with Oakwood Homes. The city had some concerns, and they're working on a design to meet those things. We have our parks supervisor who was involved with that, as well as another parks worker. They're very cognizant of that. We have miles of lakefront, and our parks are really well taken care of. So those precautions are very much taken into consideration. And a lot of this, you'll see that a lot of it's natural or, native seed along there. There's only select areas where it is lawn. And we expect that because of the proximity to the river, and the city does take a lot of precautions in that
Great.
manner. So
Thank you. And then one other question, Soren, and I don't know if Ray is on, but is any of this part of the ATB grant funding, restoration?
So right now there is some funding from the CWMA going towards the Phragmites control in the 13 acres that covers the stretch of this reach. And we've connected with Oakwood Homes and BioWest, their contractor that they've hired to do some of this work. And I'm pretty sure they're going to continue to apply for funding. As for using America the Beautiful Challenge funds, I think that's kind of TBD ID.
Okay, great. I'm just, trying to get a picture of the protections going forward and improvements for on habitat, since it's important for fish and birds and other wildlife. So thank you.
It's been interesting watching the transformation of this land. When it was agricultural land, the grazing really managed a lot of the invasive species, particularly Phragmites. It's really only been in the last decade or so that we've seen the Phragmites here just really become overgrown. Much of that's on state lands, as Greg mentioned. And so having Ray with the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands kind of leading this effort is really valuable for the weed management and control side of things. I think this is a unique project in that right now it's private land, but it will be dedicated to the city as part of the development of this park and become a public park, and it becomes integrated with all of the public land that both the state and the city manage around Utah Lake. So it's really kind of a contiguous park system that includes both Utah Lake lakefront, the hot springs, for which Saratoga Springs is named, that's also having some improvements done, and this long stretch, as Greg mentioned, of over a mile of river frontage. I'll just add to the presentation that olive green color that you see in between the lawns and trees and the more developed part is all identified as native plant materials. And I think those are still to be determined. And I'm glad Ray's made connection with the development team and the designers, because I think what that looks like is still very much in development. But I think it's an opportunity to really take some of the best practices that Ray and others have been developing and implement them here in a really big scale. We've seen Murray and Salt Lake City and Riverton's working on a project right now, doing some of this bank work that's really encouraging. This was in the map that we included with the America the Beautiful Challenge grant. And so it is conceptually a location that would be included as part of that. But as Ray noted, there's already work happening on both sides of the river, particularly on the east side, where there's an active project. In fact, Ray was out just last weekend with a bunch of folks, Girl Scouts and Hogle Zoo Conservation Program, planting trees, our tall pot trees, while the water's flowing really high out of Utah Lake right now, to get those roots really well established. So there's tons of work happening here right now, and it will just grow, I think. It's kind of exciting to see.
Thank you, sir. We also have a couple questions in the chat. Great questions. Dr. Shaw, who's unable to use her mic, she said, she asked, I think that means intact stands of native riparian vegetation that will be preserved. Any plans to rehabilitate the riparian zone via revegetation? So I guess she means like maybe some cottonwoods or willows and others that are native and ideal vegetation that we want to keep in place, if preferable. And how wide is the riparian park at its widest and narrowest point? That was a good question. That's what I had too, Jennifer, because I can't really tell what the riparian buffer is. So
I can address that as well. So in our city code, we require landscaping, that the landscaping in the riparian setback and trail setbacks, that they have to use native or naturalized plant materials that provide wildlife food and shelter, and manicured lawns, landscaping and lawns are prohibited within the riparian setbacks. So that's one thing. If you scroll up, Rick, on that, you can see, if you scroll into that, you can see where the riparian setback is on here. I believe it's the pink line, right?
okay.
Is that what it is?
Blue was the meander line, the pink, what was the pink?
I think it's the riparian setback.
Okay. And how many, what, I'm
There we
sorry,
go.
maybe I just missed it. What is the
There we go.
distance for the required riparian? Is it 50, 100, 200 feet or?
It's 50 feet is the riparian setback.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see it here, this dotted line is the riparian setback.
Oh, there it is.
So,
Okay. It's
yeah,
kind of subtle, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
so that's what is going to be planted within that area, that's what's required, is the native or naturalized plant materials. So.
And I have a question too, and I'm not familiar with the area. I haven't been to the site. So I see that you have a wetland area. I'm guessing some sort of emergent bench or floodplain. Is this something that you'll have to do some restoration on the floodplain or on the stream bank, the banks of the river? Or is this something that's already in good shape that you're working with?
I'll take a crack at that. So we have some very minor work inside the 100-year floodplain. It's all above the top of the riverbank. I'm not going to do a great job explaining this, but the floodplain was established years and years and years ago, and we believe that, and so do the folks at FEMA after talking to them, that it probably was done from not from a site visit, which kind of created lines that were included in the floodplain that don't really make sense once you're on the ground right there. And so we're going to be doing a not a map revision, but we're going to be doing a CLOMAR to address that. And again, it's just very, very minor parts, and it's really just clarifying the existing map that's out there right now.
Thank you. Okay, I know we have two other presentations, but any other questions or follow-up for Greg and Gina on this project here, on the Wander development?
Marion, let me just add one more thing, because I'm not sure if we've completely answered Jennifer's question about the riparian setback. My understanding, and correct me, Gina, if I'm wrong, is the riparian setback is a 50-foot setback from the property boundary, but it doesn't necessarily include all of the state-owned public land that's within the river corridor. So, for example, just east of the lawn here on the top, you see a large area that's state land, which is actually increases that 50-foot buffer because there's probably another 75 to 100 feet outside of the private property that is part of the public lands that the state manages. So in
helpful.
some instances, that setback for building, and things like that, buildings and lots, some cases that's as much as 250 to 300 feet or more from the actual river's edge, even though the setback is smaller than that, that's required under city ordinance. Effectively, there's a much larger area. So it varies a lot, as you can see. The area around the lawn, it's a huge setback. Some areas it's probably more like 150 feet or so in the narrow areas.
Yeah,
and
Gina,
Marion,
Rick,
Oh,
Rick or Gina, correct me if
ahead.
I'm wrong, but I believe that 50-foot starts from the top of the bank. So everything kind of below the top of the bank, almost by definition, is riparian. And so we're setting back even from that, even farther.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, and also let me just butt in here. This is Dan Potts again. My familiarity with the river. That picture is pretty with all the blue, and that's the Jordan River. But in low water years and in the wintertime, that's almost dry. You could walk across that and not even get your knees wet. The only supply of water on that part of the Jordan River are a couple of geothermal springs that bubble up there, just not too far below the lake, and so. Almost right in the Jordan River itself. I like to fish it in the wintertime sometimes because of that, hot tub.
It's sure flowing right now.
Mm-hmm.
The last couple of years it has.
Yeah, lake is full, and so they're by the compromise restriction, they have to let all that water down to the Great Salt Lake. Touchdown.
Yeah, that's really unusual, but it's great to see.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we want to make sure we have provide sufficient time as well for Nancy and Dustin to present on their projects. So I want to thank Greg and Gina for sharing this project and the work you're doing to preserve that buffer and also incorporating the Jordan River into the design. So,
Thank you,
thank
Mary,
you.
and thank you, the rest of the commission. Enjoyed my time with you and hope to see you all again soon.
Great. Thank you, Greg.